slow of movement. I'm Stephen Denock. I'm with Raise Green. We are a crowdfunding for climate companies and solutions. And that's our focus. So you may have heard of things like Start Engine, Refunder, or like that, but it's all climate. And let's see, is everyone here with a nonprofit? Anyone with a for-profit entity? Okay, all right. Well, that helps me hone the presentation because Raise Green is a crowdfunding portal that can issue we can facilitate the issues of different kinds of securities. Okay, so if this is a for-profit audience working for for-profit companies, you can issue stock equity through Raise Green. We also do debt. And as I will show you, nonprofits can basically essentially get a loan from the crowd for a project. So so with that, this could easily be like at least a half-day workshop, a full day. There's nothing difficult about setting up a crowdfund campaign, but there's a lot of intricacies to it. So it's can feel daunting, but if you have all your ducks in a row, you just kind of check off things as you go, and you're diligent. It's a project. It's just like managing a project to get crowdfund going. So so just real quick informal poll. Has anybody before you learned that I was going to be presenting this here today, has anybody thought of doing a crowdfund for a climate project? Okay, good. Well, good. You'll learn something new today. So that's the goal. And also tell you a little bit more about Raise Green too in the midst of all this. So this is a very short slide deck. But most of what I'm going to show you is other documents and things that support the process. So just to sum this all up, basic elements of a crowdfund campaign. And actually, even before I say this, has anybody actually participated in a crowdfund, like as an investor or donation based? No. Okay. So so basically, there are different kinds of crowdfund campaigns. Raise Green is a platform that does equity and debt issues. There's also GoFundMe is more of like donation based, right? There's a cause. The one we hear a lot about is like somebody wanting to cover medical bills, unfortunately, in this country. So you do a GoFundMe. So that's a donation based platform. And then there are rewards based platforms. You might have somebody starting a company and they're going to, let's say, build a better mousetrap. So, well, if you donate $100, you'll get a mousetrap out of the deal, right? So there's different kinds of flavors of crowdfunding, and Raise Green and what I'm talking about here today is about issuance of securities. Okay. So the basic, and I underscore basic, elements of crowdfund campaign. There's more to it than this, but this is, as a primer, this is like what you need to know. So first of all, there's documents, and the main documents that I'll show you examples of these that you prepare in a crowdfund campaign are what's called a Form C. Basically, a disclosure document. Think of it as like a prospectus. If you were investing in securities like stock, and you get a prospectus from the investment company. And by the way, I'm happy to send all this to you. So don't worry too much about the or having to capture it. I'll just give you at the end. So the Form C disclosure document, that's where you disclose everything, right? So everything that could go wrong with the project is where you're going to put that. So the Form C is not a marketing document. This is where issuers will get hung up, or they'll say, well, yeah, we have got risk in the project, and they try to hedge it, or they try to explain it away or somehow soften it. And really, you don't want to do that. The Form C is all about full disclosure. You never want an investor to come back to you and or come back to your project or your entity and say, had I known that this risk was present, I would not have invested. So that's what you don't want to happen. So exhaustive disclosure of risks in Form C. Subscription agreement is basically the security itself. It's like the note if it's a loan. And then the offering page is, that's the marketing document. And in the context of what we do in Raise Green, the offering page is the web page for the offering, for the crowdfund. I'll go through all those in a little more detail a bit. The second piece, the second element is filing. And this is filing because we're issuing securities with a crowdfund. It's literally something that's has to be filed with the Securities and Exchange Commission. So there's a database called Edgar, and there's a couple of steps there. One, you apply for what's called a central index key, and that allows you just to basically file your paperwork with the SEC. You file the Form C, and then there's these other Form C types. So, and just very generally, because there's a lot I could say about those, but really the Form CU is an update. So when the crowdfund ends, you have to, 5 days at the end of the campaign, you file a Form CU that basically says, crowdfund has ended, we expect to bring in X number of dollars. And then there's a second Form CU, like when you actually close on the money and it lands in your bank account, then you would basically, another update says, we actually brought in Y dollars, right? Because X and Y don't always equal. You might have commitments of a certain amount of money and they go through escrow, and then the escrow provides it back to you. Some transactions, they don't go through, or investors ask for refund before the end of the campaign. So there's just a ticking in time that's done between the end of the campaign and when the money is distributed to you. That's Form CU. And then Form CAR is annual report. So 120 days after the end of your fiscal year, after your crowdfund campaign is over, you're required to file an annual report. And it's basically the Form C without all the risk stuff. And then if you don't expect a crowdfund ever again, you file then what's called a Form CTR, which should terminate, because then it terminates you from the obligation to file annual reports going forward. So most of what I'm going to talk about today is just the top part, Form C, the subscription agreement, the offering page. If you were to come to Raise Green and say, hey, I want to facilitate through you, we would help you with all of this. So I don't need to get too far in the weeds on the CU, CAR.
A quick question on the Form CTR. If you file that, then you decide you want to do another crowdfunding source, you start all over again, or is there another form that you can?
Yeah,
I changed my mind.
Yeah. So yeah, the question is, if you file the Form CTR, does that basically prevent you from raising again? No, it does not. So if you came back even a year later and said, I want to do another crowdfund campaign, you just go through the process again. Yeah. So yeah, it doesn't affect your ability to raise again. It just absolves you of the responsibility to keep filing annual reports in the meantime.
Yeah.
And then the last basic element, the really important one, is the crowd. And we're crowdfunding. So the crowd is your community, your supporters, advocates, stakeholders, friends, family, best buddies, cheerleaders, etc. Anybody who might have an interest in what you're doing and want to support it. That's the crowd. That's the key piece. That's a marketing art. All the stuff above it's pretty scientific. It's rules based. It's what you're required to do. Crowd is completely your creative acumen and being this persistent pest and going up there and asking for the dollars. So and the mistake a lot of issuers make is that they will put together a very extensive social media campaign, email campaign, and it's all more passive. And they're not they haven't thought on the front end about who they could ask to bring into the raise. So with any crowd fund, especially in this space, and what we've learned to raise green is, and now when we consider issuers on the platform, we explicitly ask when you come into, when you set up this raise, you have at least 40 to 50% of your investor base already in mind. Or the better way to state it is, have you already identified 40 to 50% of the funds raised through X number of investors? So we call soft circling. So have you soft circled your investor list? And that's going to help ensure your success with the crowd fund. So if you can identify those folks up front, and then you can provide them with a heads up and say, we're planning on doing a fundraise, call it crowdfunding. We're planning to raise capital. We're interested in like seeing who's in, we want to find out who's interested in this. So you get their names, you get their contact information, and you could ask them how much would they invest in it. You can get a figure. It's called so I'll get into this too when I show you the documents, but that's called a indications of interest, or testing the waters. So you can test the waters as long as you disclose that you did it. You can disclose that before you see. But the crowd's important, because the more you can identify your crowd and get their commitments up front, the more the chances of success for your raise are higher. The one thing you can't do when you're doing an indications of interest, you cannot collect money. You can't collect until you actually put the offering out there. So no one can write checks during that front end piece, even if they said, "Oh, just put it in the drawer and take it out later." You can't take any money in any form or fashion during the indications of interest phase if you do that. Okay. All right. And again, I'm happy to send you these slides. There's one up here. These are the links I'm going to go through. I'll just leave that up, because everything I'm about to show you is publicly available. Everything from regulation, crowdfunding, which is on the SEC's website, the Form C templates. So Raise Green provides, if you were to come to us and express an interest in crowdfunding, we have our own templates for these documents. But you could also go to the SEC, and they have a template, which is what ours is based off of. Ours is more user-friendly. That's why we created it. But the SEC provides one, and you can see all the questions that they want to know in advance of the offering. There's a link to Raise Green's offerings on here, and the reason why I give you this link is because everything I'm going to show you is publicly available, including all of the offers that we have done on our platform. So that means you could download the Form Cs, the offering pages, everything for every offer that we've ever done on our platform. And you can use it as an example. You could read through them. I'm going to walk through some of those. Again, we won't be able to do a full exhaustive look at it, but you'll see all the elements, the basic elements of these documents. The SEC's website, or what's called EDGAR, which is the database that you register everything through, is on there. And then my email is there, and there's again the QR code. See on that. Again, if you email me, I'll send you these slides with the links. Any questions so far? I move over here. So the first thing I'll show you is the SEC's Form C. So if you were to go to that link, it gives you this PDF file, and this is a 20-page document. And this gives you, it's asking you for everything that they want to know when you're filing this thing. So a lot of information, pretty basic and plain looking document, and also a bit Today, roughly, a lot of rules and explanations are on here, so what we've done. So this is our version of that. This is Ray's Green's version of the Form C template. And there's, you never, you can come up with your own version of this too. As long as you're answering all the questions is the main thing. So in our version, we give a lot of instructions up front just to make this as user friendly as possible. So the main thing in all of this, at least for the purposes of this presentation, what's important is what kind of wording to avoid and what kind of wording you can use. So you avoid anything that is making a promise. So absolute statements don't sit well when you're issuing securities. You can never say we're going to change the world. You can say we aim to change the world. Right? It's two different, it's slightly different twist in what those two things mean. So instead of using the word will, you would say anticipates or aims or so any other similar word. A statement like there's little competition for this service or product, you would say there's limited competition, perhaps. Making statements like customers or clients or the community wants is an absolute that you would avoid. You say our community prefers. Like our community prefers to go to be powered with solar. But you can't say our company is demanding or our community is demanding to be powered by solar. Who wants it? So just beware of absolute statements. That's one of the big lessons. So like when we look at these documents that our clients submit to us, like that's what we're coming through. That's the first thing we're coming through, because even though we tell you this, even though we tell you as being the issuer, even though we tell our clients, our issuers this, people can't help themselves and they're going to say, yes, we're changing the world. Even though we tell you can't say that. So we do a very extensive comb through of this to ensure that you're not getting yourself in trouble by saying things like that. You have to hedge. So with the Form C, the other thing on here is the terms of the security. So in this case, if it's a note, right, you're getting a loan from the crowd, you would say, what's the interest rate? Is it secured or unsecured, matured, all that sort of thing. The key parts of the Form C, table of contents. So the first section there, so updates about the Form C. So there's some initial disclosure documentation. It's all boilerplate that's in there. We just leave that alone. But then you're going to talk about your entity, which would be the company, but think of it as your entity if you're a nonprofit. What the business is, what do you do? The risk factors. Again, at the beginning, I said risks were important. Like this is a risk disclosure document. So everything that could go wrong with your project or your entity goes in here. Again, you never want an investor to say, had I known there was X risk, I would not have invested in this. Okay, so full disclosure of risks. You talk about the financial condition of the entity and so forth. And then there are some appendices, which are pretty standard things as well. So let me hop over to that. Okay, so this is an actual project that was on Ray's training called Solar for Us. I think it's a Maryland-based entity, community solar project. So what they were doing, they were targeting $270,000 up to a maximum of $370,000 of their offering. So in a crowdfunding campaign, there's two figures that you will disclose. One is what's called a minimum or the target, and then there's a maximum amount. So that's what they're doing here. They're saying there's a target offering of $270,100 to a maximum of $370,100. And the way it works is that when Solar for Us put that out there, they're confident they're going to hit at least 270,100. Because if they don't get to take any of it at the end of the day. So if they, at the end of the raise, if they raise $270,000, but not 270,100, they would not be able to take that money. So when you're setting a minimum or what's called a target, I'll use those interchangeably. You want to be fairly confident that you're going to reach at least that. So what you don't want is the situation where you raise 270 at the end of the raise and then you can't take any of it until you get to 270,100. Okay. And then the maximum amount is basically the ceiling. And it's basically saying, like, once we get the 370,100, perfect, we're done. A crowdfund raise under regulation CF has to be at least 21 days, but it can go as far as you want. So 21 days to X date, that could be 3 months down the road, 6 months, a year. Well, let's say Solar for Us had a, let's say this was like a 3-month raise, and after the first, it goes gangbusters. After the first month, they hit 370,100, it would close. So you don't have to run it all the way to the end. If they wanted to keep it going and take more money, that's called an oversubscription. They would file a Form CA, remember the Form Cs, right? They would file a Form CA, which is an amendment that basically says, we are going to take additional investments above our maximum. We're going to set a new maximum. So anytime there's a change that's made to an offering, either in the amount of money, the time, that's the raise duration, those are all amendments. So you file different Form Cs to basically declare that's what you're going to do. So in this case, you know, their raise, they were paying an interest rate of 5.5%. The maturity date is 2038, and then the minimum investment $100 and the incremental amounts of $100. So on Raise Green, for the most part, all of our issues are a minimum investment of $100, and that's what allows the crowd to come in, right? It's a low enough amount that the community, if that's who you're appealing to, we call it democratizing capital. Because it's a low barrier to entry, $100. Now, we do have another issue on our platform that doesn't want to deal with $100 investments, so their minimum's $1,000. And you can set that, the issuer can set their minimum investment amount. But most of our issuers are doing $100. Now, that said, when this was a successful raise, so they raised at least 270,100. I don't remember what the exact amount was. Those were not all 100 investments. So on Raise Green, our investor base, meaning the people who've created accounts on our platform, range all the way from retail investors through accredited investors. And what those two things mean is retail investors are regular people, not millionaires. There are certain income thresholds that once you fall below, the Securities and Exchange Commission considers you a retail investor. And retail investors, per the regulation, they can invest up to something like $5,000 a year in crowdfunding across all campaigns. So there's certain rules about ceilings. I think that's protecting the investors. It's pretty much self-disclosed. So even though, let's say I was a retail investor and I ended up investing in a couple of different crowdfunding campaigns, at the end of the day, I crossed the threshold. No one's probably going to catch me at that. But it's just a protection for the retail investors. So the rule is, that above, I think it's something like 5,000 off the top of my head, I can't remember exactly, but if you're a retail investor, you're limited to that amount of money a year to invest. Okay. If you're an accredited investor, meaning that you surpass a certain income or net worth, personal net worth level, it's unlimited. And you can invest whatever you want in any crowdfunding campaign, as many as you want. So an offering like this, I'm guessing that there were several $100 investments. There were probably several, $200, $300, $400, $500 investments, and then there were $10,000 investments and $25,000 investments. If I were to go back and look at the data, at a level that high, I don't know if we've ever had anything where it was all filled with $100 investments. So you're going to have a mix. And, frankly, our investor base is the whole spectrum. So we have retail, we have through institutional investors, accredited investors. Trusts will invest. People will use, you can use your IRA to invest. As well as DAF or donor advice.
If you don't meet that minimum amount, can you change the timeline?
Excellent
Or-
question.
Is it only for the maximum?
So if you don't meet the minimum amount, I'll give you a scenario. So the question is, if you don't meet the minimum amount, can you change it? So that would be a material change. You file a Form CA. And let's say they were within, 15 days of this raise ending, and they weren't confident they were going to reach the 270-100, but let's say they were at 250. They could file a material amendment, a Form CA, that basically says we're changing our minimum or our target to 250. And that's how an issuer can still take advantage of the money that they have commitments for without hitting that first minimum that they declared. So, yeah, you're not necessarily locked in from day one. You do have the flexibility to make changes.
Can you invest as an individual?
Can you invest as an individual? Yes. Yes. Yeah, and that's where one of our values with Race Green is that the reason why we're a crowdfund platform is because we wanted to, one part of our mission is to democratize investment in climate solutions. So that inherently involves individuals. Yeah. Yes.
So I guess a clarifying point to the question that was asked. So you just wouldn't want to make sure that you submit that extension of time before you get to that date where it expires the original.
Yeah, you have to file it before your initial, like if you did, let's say, 90-day raise, you've got to file that amendment before the 90 days is up. Yeah, you can't wait till the very end and
Sure.
say, oh, well, never mind, I wanted to change my minimum. You have to give it enough time because the other thing that happens is when you make a material amendment, you have to go back to all the investors who've made a commitment to date and get them to recommit. So that's a process, right? So what happens is so with Race Green, it's fairly automated, and I'm sure it is with other platforms too, that material amendments filed, we send a notice to investors saying, greetings, Solar for Us has made a material amendment to its offer. It's going to change its minimum or its target amount. Therefore, and because that's considered a material change, you as the investor, we need you to recommit. Doesn't mean they have to, and they're not adding money or they're not changing their investment amount or commitment amount, but they do need to acknowledge that they are kind of re-upping that commitment, if you will. So again, it's disclosure. Okay. Yes.
A follow-up to the follow-up, is there like any logic, and this could be a silly question of like underrepresenting what your minimum is to not have to go through those hoops? Like if I actually wanted 270,000, but like I put 200,000, like why would that be a bad idea, I
Right,
guess?
so, yeah, that's a good question, so it's sort of, it's like gaming, right? I love that. So, yeah, can you, so to summarize your question, like what kind, like why? What kind of flexibility do you have in changing minimums, and why would you do and why would you not, and why wouldn't you just lowball it, I guess, if I'm interpreting your question, right? So that's a good question, and actually with a lot of our issuers, especially if it's a younger, or if it doesn't need like this much capital, right? So solar for us is like, you know, really we need 270 to keep this project. I mean, you know, so we can't, it's just not feasible if they bring less than that. But if it's a smaller project or a less mature entity, and this happens a lot with our startups on the equity side, where it's, you know, the guy in his garage, you know, just the 1 or 2 person kind of business, and we will usually recommend that their minimum or their target be a low number, like $10,000. Now, at the end of the day, if the $10,000 is really not going to be helpful to them, and they really need to bring, let's say, $30,000 minimum, we say, well, go with that. Be thoughtful about what your minimum is, but don't make it so high that at the end of the day, if you fall a few dollars short at the end of the raise, you're going to just lose all of it. You could have used it. So there's nothing unethical about making it a really low number at all. It's just whether you as the entity or the business feel like, is it worth it to go through all this to only bring in $10,000 at the end of the day? So that's the call you have to make as the business owner or as the executive director of the nonprofit or whatever it is to be. So.
You find that though people want to invest in things that they're seeing other people invest in. So if you're setting your minimum a little bit higher, you're generating momentum for your fundraising.
So that, yes, so that's the art of the marketing of all this, right? Like you, and I would say when the entities that are doing that $10,000 minimum, those are the ones that they're going to a lot of friends and family and getting them to come in first. Otherwise, if it's more of a community kind of project, and whether it's, when I say community, it could be like a community solar project, or let's just go the other extreme and say it's a business, you know, opening a coffee shop and they want to raise money for it. The community's going to want, like if there's momentum, they're more like psychologically more prone to invest in it or want to. So that's part of the marketing of it.
Can I ask one more question?
Yeah, sure, go for it.
Okay, so how, I guess, just how common is it that like you over exceed your minimum? Like, is it common that it goes over, or does it usually just stay around the minimum?
Yeah, so how prevalent is it that you would raise beyond your minimum? Depends how successful you are at marketing, and is what it comes down to. The one thing that no one can ever have, regardless of the crowdfund, whether it's this Raise Green or if you're doing something like Start Engine or if you're doing a GoFundMe, you can never just have the attitude, build it and they will come. There's the promotional effort that helps push these things over the top and contribute to success. So that's what it takes, getting the word out. And I would say, like, so Raise Green's been around for 5 years. And within the last 6 months to 12 months, we've come to the point, like one of the things that we've changed strategically about the way we work with prospective issuers, and I mentioned this at the outset, is that we really pin them down about like, what's your own community like? Like what kind of investment base or investor base do you feel you have that you can tap even before this goes live? Because that's gonna make all the difference. We have one that's currently on the platform. Excellent marketing, the hired marketing firm, did great social media campaign. And for a while it's crickets, because what they didn't do, and you know, we really, okay, this is a good lesson for us, is what they really didn't do is they didn't think about who could come in at the outset. And they didn't have, now we're actually requiring our prospective issuers to like show us your list of people. You know, and it doesn't obligate them, right? I mean, you can't force somebody to invest, even if they say, oh yeah, you know, I'd really be interested if you would like with this. I did invest $1,000. I mean, at the end of the day, you can't make them do that, but if you do the work up front and you get a sense of whether people would be interested in how much they might put in, it's part of the momentum. But the other question about momentum that we can create for the raise, and then like once this launches, if you go back to that testing the waters list, and let's say 50% of the people who made a commitment actually come in, like within the first 2 weeks of your campaign, you've got some money coming in, and that's going to create that psychological momentum for the crowd to say, hey, maybe this is worth getting in on. Yeah. Okay. So let's see. So okay, so this is the table of contents for Solar Trust. And the other things I'll mention here, they talk about their company, the business, the risk factors. I'll show you that in a moment, the offering and so forth. And then there's these appendices. So important information about crowdfunding is boilerplate stuff that we plug in there for you. Your financial statements. So this is another important piece that's worth mentioning. When you're at this level, at a minimum of 270, their financial statements had to be reviewed by an independent accountant. There's a number that you might hear in crowdfunding at 124,000. That's a magic number, because that's number at which, if you're raising below that or up to 124, you have self-certified financials. So the chief or the principal executive officer of the entity is self-certifying the financials for the entity at $124,000. Once you get over 124, all of a sudden now you need to have an independent account review your financials. And we can make referrals for those, because now we've got a couple of accounting partners who will commit to those, turning those around within a couple, like 2 weeks. The pain point with getting reviewed financials is that accountants do not move at the speed of the rest of the world. So we had issuers who were getting an independent review, and then we're waiting like 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks. 3 months later, we're still waiting for it, and we got proactive, and we need to build a referral list of accountants who understand what crowdfunding is and then can move quickly. So now, because we don't want that to spook issuers from pursuing minimum amounts above 124, especially if that's what's needed. So we refer to a couple of different firms for independent account reviews. And then if you're a first-time issuer and you're raising above 1.2 million, then you've got to get an audit. And with regulation crowdfunding, an entity can raise up to $5 million in a 12-month period. So that's the important thing to mention about the financial statements. The subscription agreement is actually the security itself. It's what the investor is going to sign. It's going to have the terms of the investments. If it's a debt deal, it's going to tell them when the principal and the interest payments are going to occur, that kind of thing. The offering page is actually a web page for the offering. And what we literally do is we take a PDF of the web page. And then we plot that in this document. And then the testing the water materials, again, this is if you had gone out and you were, pre-vetting your community, your crowd. Anything that you put out there that's like marketing, like material to do that, you have to disclose in the Form C and actually literally put in the document. So just generally, any questions on this basic stuff? So what I want to do, because I talk a lot about risks. I'm going to scroll down to that section. There's a lot of boilerplate stuff here we include in our template for everything. So it's all pretty basic. The company information, is what's the legal name of the company. What your website has to be in here as well. How many employees? In this case, they didn't have any. This was a nonprofit, and this was a new entity for the project, so they actually didn't have any employees at the time they were issuing securities, the date of inception, where they were incorporated, and so forth. There's a bunch of attestations regarding eligibility. So basically, what we do is when any crowdfund platform that's doing a debt or equity facilitation is going to do background checks on all the key principal people in the organization. Right, so make sure that you haven't done any financial fraud in the past, or you haven't been arrested for doing terrible things, or there isn't any other kind of legal thing that would prohibit you from from being a principal in a entity that's raising capital. And we run those background checks through our escrow provider. And then there's these other attestations, so on and so forth. These are also in the SEC Form C. So again, you can download, if you go to Raise Green, and if you set up an account for yourself on Raise Green, which you can do, there's no obligation. We don't ask for any money, or we don't ask for your bank account information. You could just literally your name and a password and your email address. If you sign up for an account at Raise Green, you can go to any one of our offers and download these documents. And you can just see how others have done it. The directors and officers of the company or the entity are listed here. If it's an ownership type thing, like what's the ownership of the entity? So this was a nonprofit that had created a separate entity for this project. The description of the business. They could talk about like customer demand and so forth. In their Form C, they talked about what the market was, or in terms of eligible low, moderate income households and so forth. And they have a lot here for actually in their business plan. This is more than if you look at other offerings, because the offering page, the web page is supposed to have a lot of this on it. It doesn't necessarily have to be in the Form C, but they chose to put it in here. But again, we would coach you on this kind of thing if you came to Raise Green to do it. So let me get down to the risks. This is all business plan stuff. Okay, risk factors. So this is really important. This is the very first disclosure. A crowdfunding investment involves risk. You should not invest any funds in this offering unless you can afford to lose your entire investment. So at Raise Green, we do a great deal of due diligence on our issuers because we don't want to expose our community to anything that would be sketchy or default, or is just kind of like a idea in the back of a napkin without any substance behind it. So that said, a crowdfunding investment involves risk, and you should not invest any funds in this offering unless you can afford to lose your entire investment. So regardless of the amount of due diligence that we as Race Green do or any other platform does, the SEC is really clear that, you know, this is crowdfunding and people who are investing in this should not have an issue if no one's gonna be happy if they lose their investment, but that's a risk. It's like one of the key risks. And then it tells you, like, you know, if you're making an investment decision, rely on your own examination of the issuer, et cetera. Okay, so that said, so that's like the preamble to the risk factors section of this document, and then there are different risk types. So specific risk factors at the material level. Material risk factors are the things that are inherently risky about the business you're in or the thing that you do. So, and that's gonna be different for every entity. I mean, there will be some things in common. Again, what I would do is, you know, invite you to download any of these and look through these risks yourself. And then give you a sense, like, this is a solar project, right? So you know, so the risks here are gonna be pretty common to any kind of community solar. So they basically detail those. Subscriber repayment risk, corresponding utility rates risk, SREC sales risk, operating risks, project and supplier delay risk, undercapitalization, construction risk, weather, right? Inflation reduction risk, direct pay benefit risk. So that, you know, this is hot right now. I think this is, we all have heard of direct pay at this point. You don't know, you know, the risk is you don't know when the funds are coming in. This is part of the reason why so like entities like this would do a crowdfund to kind of a bridge to get them funded until the direct pay comes in, for instance. Change in regulations is a risk. So this goes on and on, right? Software, hardware failure, right? Reliance on contractors is a risk. So any risk to the business that you're doing, you put in here, and you don't leave it out, you don't edit it, you don't spin it. We had one issuer who would come in, he was putting these risks in his document, and then he would write like a mitigation. Oh, I have this risk, but this is what I'm doing to kind of soften it so that it doesn't happen. This is not a risk assessment and mitigation document, this is risk disclosure, and that's it. So when we go through this and we look for those things, because there won't be mitigating factors in this document in any fashion. And then we get to so the next part of this now is the risks to the security, right? So solar for us is doing a note, it means it's a loan, it's gonna have an interest payment for X number of years. And here's these are all risks typical to a fixed income instrument. So, you know, credit risk, unsecured risk, subordination, so forth. And it goes on and on. We have templates for all this that we plug in, and then we help sort of tailor it for each individual issuer. Crowdfunding risks more specifically are detailed here too. All right. Any questions on that piece? So again, what I'm underscoring here is the Form C is a risk disclosure document. It's your prospectus. You're never going to want an investor to say, I would not have invested if you told me that there was weather risk, for instance. Oh, we hail can break these solar panels or what, you know, whatever it is. You want to be full disclosure risks, anything that could go wrong, even if the chance is minor.
So you said at the top there, it was a nonprofit who created another entity.
Yeah.
Curious, can a government entity create a separate entity to do a crowdfunding? We have a project where we want to use an alternative method of financing to get
And government being at what level?
local government.
So I'm gonna give you a short answer to the question is, I'm pretty sure it's yes.
Okay.
So for instance, like, so one of our recurring issuer types are green banks.
Mhm.
So Connecticut Green Bank, somebody that we've done 10, going on 10 offering for them coming up. There are ways to structure that.
Okay.
Yeah, so yeah, if you're interested in speaking in more detail about it, yeah, just hit me up. Subsequently. Sure. Let's see, so we're at 4:23. Let me just real quick, see if there's anything else I want to note in here. So use of proceeds is something that we'll disclose as well in the Form C. So, and you'll see here that you're disclosing, if you hit the target amount, which is the minimum, what you would use it for, and then if you hit the maximum, what you use that for. This is a very light version of use of proceeds. Actually, if solar for us did another issue through us, or if we went back in time and redid this by our standards today, we'd have more line items in here. This is pretty high level. We would instruct them to add a couple other things there, like any legal expenses, accounting, and so forth. But the idea is that you're saying, you're declaring what you're gonna do with the proceeds. So that's an important part of the Form C. The tiers of testing the waters piece. So what they're telling you here, so this bracket number 11A, that's the section in the SEC's template that this maps to. So in our template, in order for us to be able to track that we've covered everything in the SEC's Form C template, we just add the number in the section. That's what those mean. So in 11A in the Form C, the SEC's Form C, it's the testing the water section. You're saying whether or not you did that upfront solicitation. And in this case, they did, and they're saying see Appendix 5 for the materials that we published in order to do that testing the waters. Delivery of securities, canceling a commitment to purchase. So basically, investors can cancel their commitment up until 48 hours prior to the end of the raise. This rule. And then there's a whole bunch of other terms that go along with that. This is all boilerplate. The securities are being offered. If it's equity, do the securities have voting rights? It's things like that. That would not apply to nonprofits, of course. Restriction on transfer of the securities. So because they're private securities, there's limitations on how there's no market, right? There's no, like, it's not traded on the stock exchange or the bond market. So there's restrictions about what you can do to transfer these to other people, if that was ever something you wanted to do. And it's all just spelled out here. I don't need to get into it. I'm just going to fly through some of this and see if there's anything else worth mentioning in the last minute here. There's a financial statements disclosure. So the last 2 fiscal years, if the entity's been around that long, you would update these figures. So total assets, cash equivalents, accounts receivable, short-term, long-term debt, revenue, sales, cost of goods, taxes paid. Then solar for us is, all they had was $5,000 in the bank at that time. So that's all you disclose. And there's no prior fiscal year end, right? But you do have, so if you've been around a while, if your entity's been around a while, you're going to have more to disclose here. Anticipated revenues. So expected expenses. So forth. And then we can see this. The appendix 1 for information on crowdfunding and so forth. So in the interest of keeping this on time, not going over, here's your financial statements. So it's literally what the accountants are preparing. We just paste it here. there's the independent accountants review report, and it's just literally pasted in there. And then the subscription agreement, this is the document that investors sign. It looks very similar to the Form C, but it is different because it talks about the offering itself, what you're subscribing to or buying, how you're paying for it, and so forth. And then that gets signed, that'll get signed by the investor at the bottom. I realize I'm flying through this. And here's where the investor signs it. So we manage all this. So basically the way with Raise Green, if you came to us and did your offering through us, you give us power of attorney to sign these, countersign these for you. Because what we've learned the hard way is that if we count on the issuer to sign the subscription agreements, and let's say you've got 50 to 100 investors at the end of the day, that's a chore. And issuers, other things get in the way, and because we want this done and closed in a timely way, basically our issuer agreement with you as the issuer gives us power of attorney to do all counter signatures. And then what we deliver back to you is like just Excel, like here's your investor list. These are and then you as the issuer track that. You're responsible for the interest payments if it's a loan, let's say. If it was an equity interested, you would be responsible for managing your cap table. And in terms of if it's a debt and you're needing to pay back investors, we do have an agreement with North Capital, which is our escrow provider, that they can facilitate the payments for you. And it's a lot easier than doing it yourself. You certainly can. Organizations, depending on how sophisticated they are with, financial servicing, some it's a no-brainer, others it's a bigger lift. So we can provide your referral to that sort of provider that can do that for you. And then the other thing that follows here is going to be the offering page. So we literally take a snapshot of the web page that this offering is on the Raise Green. So we just PDF the website, and then that gets pasted in here. And this is kind of ugly looking, but as long as it's all there, as long as it's a rendering of what was published, that's what we plug in here. All right. With that, any questions? Yes.
Are there any cases in which you would recommend that a nonprofit like not crowdfund?
Any cases that recommend that a nonprofit would not crowdfund? If you weren't 100% sure to support, like it would, yeah. I mean, I would think for me, if I were in the shoes of an executive director or a board, it's like if I'm not confident that I've got a crowd behind me that's interested in supporting this kind of thing, that would be my first. That's the first thing that comes to mind. Yeah. But we do. I mean, we actively are marketing ourselves to nonprofits, so we're not looking for reasons not to do it. But again, it's the key is you have the crowd identified, at least in part of that's the consideration. Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry, I may have missed this. I was a little late. So this type of crowdfunding is a variety of investors and they get something in return after their investment or after we like reach our campaign goal. So this isn't like traditional crowd or like.
Right, so this what we do with Raise Green is under regulation crowdfunding, so we're issuing securities
Okay,
through the SEC.
okay,
Or I mean, the registered securities, we're regulated by the SEC, and we're a member of what's called FINRA, which is the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority. We're different from donation crowdfunding,
Right, okay,
and we're different from like, rewards crowdfunding.
okay,
So basically, when people are investing in this, they're either going to get equity in a company,
right,
or if it's a nonprofit, most nonprofits, what they're doing is, they're getting a loan from the crowd, and those investors are getting paid back interest.
okay. From the nonprofit, or is it a loan that comes from a bank? How does the loan,
But the loan is literally from the crowd.
it's from the folks, okay,
Now, you'll have the terms like a loan from a bank,
okay,
but instead of paying the bank back, you're paying back the people who invested in it. Yeah.
okay,
And typically you give them a little bit extra premium in their interest rate because this is more risky than,
right,
yeah,
like a business.
Yeah. that's a good question. Anything else? Feel free to stick around. I'm happy to answer more questions. I understand that you're eager to. But thank you very much.